On October 28, 2023, the Louisiana Center for the Book in the State Library of Louisiana presented the 19th edition of the Louisiana Book Festival. Flash Fiction America, co-edited by John Dufresne, is only one of the outstanding programs featured at this event. John Dufresne is the author of 2 short story collections and 7 novels, including Louisiana Power and Light and Love Warps the Mind a Little, both New York Times Notable Books of the Year. He has written 4 books on writing fiction and edited 3 anthologies. He is co-editor of Flash Fiction America. His short stories have twice been named Best American Mystery Stories in 2007 and 2010. He is a 2013 Guggenheim Fellow in Fiction and teaches fiction writing in the MFA program at Florida International University. Ladies and gentlemen, Flash Fiction America with John Dufresne.
Thank you all for coming. This has been a great event, isn't it? It's wonderful walking around here, all these books. Wow. It's so well supported by the community. So I'm going to talk about, can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to talk about flash fiction, and I'm going to read representative stories from the anthology that we all put out, which is out recently. So the only thing that I wrote is what I'll read at the beginning, kind of by way of introduction to the anthology. And then we'll read some stories. I think one of the, one of the readers just walked in. So we're going to start, before I say anything, because Maurice was kind enough to come. Louisiana Author of the Year, Maurice is here to read his story, Bigsby. And so I'll let him start, and then you could take off after you're done reading, because I know his whole family is here celebrating his award. So he was kind enough to say, I'll run over there and do it, and here he is. So please, as I said, welcome. Thank you. Oh, my pleasure.
Good afternoon. How you all doing today? Let's see. So I'm from New Orleans, so we always got to start everything with music first. So let me play a little music to get the mood right. Let's see. Oh, I don't know. What should I play? All right. All right, this is Bigsby. This is a story that I wrote kind of on a lark. A friend of mine was giving an event in New Orleans, and she was like, I want you to read at my event. I said, well, okay. What should I read? Write something new. So I wrote this in a couple days, went and did the event, and I was like, I like the response to that story. But the secret story of this story is that it's actually based on an old Dave Chappelle sketch from 2004. If you've seen that show, you know what I'm talking about, but I'll just read and see how it goes. All right, Bigsby. That's the way it was when I was younger. I never had a hard time getting a date. I'm not bragging. I swear I'm not bragging. Probably because I had 3 sisters growing up, you know? Now, the chicks always liked me. Black chicks, too. Man, if I went out, they give me that eye, you know? You know, ladies, they don't like looking in the eye that much, right? Am I right? Yeah, I dated some of them. You know, there was this one in college, and I haven't thought about that girl in a long time now. What was her name? Aisha. Yeah, she got closer to me than most people I met around that time. By junior year, she was in my apartment. We got along pretty well. We did everything together for a while. Picnics in City Park, day trips to the beach in Biloxi. People would stare at us, you know. Mixed race couple and all that. I mean, at first I thought it was because she was so good looking. You know, she had this shape, you know what I'm talking about? You know, not just the hips and everything, but like her face. Like she had this heart-shaped face and those eyes. But after a while, we fizzled out. That's right, that's when I met Samantha. Those redheads, bro. Dang, bro. You always got to drag that ghost out of the closet. You want to know what happened with us, Kyle? Oh, I'll tell you what happened with us, Kyle. And when I tell you, don't bring this up ever again, all right? And this whiskey is giving me a headache, man. You got to order something better. Don't be so cheap all the time, bro. Samantha was perfect, and we fell in love quick. You know, it wasn't just the usual things like compatibility and looks. Samantha was ambitious. She wanted to build an empire with me. Now, her father was older, and he had this company that, put the video machines in all the bars around town. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but you know how many bars there are in New Orleans? The family was loaded, and she wanted to take over one day and keep expanding it and making it bigger and bigger and bigger. One day, I came home to our condo downtown. She was my fiancée by then, Samantha. Now, we were considering a June wedding. We were talking about buying a house over in Old Metairie, starting a family. Her parents, they cover all the costs. Now, my family had nothing, so they had to cover the cost. Hell, I had nothing myself. Now, that day, I remember so well, the condo was so quiet. And I thought Samantha was out for a jog somewhere. Maybe she was at the coffee shop. But she was sitting on the bed holding some papers in her hand. Her face was all blotchy, and she looked terrible. She looked terrible, Kyle. She asked how I could lie to her the way I lied to her like that. And then she threw the papers at me, but they fell on the floor. Now, I'm thinking she's accusing me of running around on her. Like she'd hired a PI or something, but no, man, it wasn't anything like that at all. Nah, I picked the papers up and looked at them. It's one of those breakdowns for a company that checks your DNA. She said it wasn't her idea to do that. She said her mother must have swabbed the cup I drank out of or something. I was furious. I mean, who does that, bro? I could have punched a hole in the wall. The percentages were highlighted. Now, I had plenty of points on the European side of things like Irish and Italian, but the paper said 24% sub-Saharan Africa. Now, this was news to me, and that's what I told Samantha. And she says to me, I'm not a bigot. But she had to think about her parents and how they respond to things. I mean, what would she tell her friends? What would she tell her Nana? So, about a week later, I moved out. Yeah, this is better, Kyle. This is real whiskey right here. Nah, I don't think that sheet was right about me. I don't think the sheet was right at all. I think all that computerized mumbo jumbo, that's just bull, man. Look, I know my family tree. My great-grandparents were still alive when I was a little boy. They had roots in Sicily. I know my heritage, Kyle. Give me some more of this whiskey, man. Don't be cheap. Make it a double this time. The funny thing is, years later, I ran into that Aisha at a festival. The festival over in Ponchatoula. Yeah, the one with the strawberries. That's the one. And, we kind of picked up, where we left off. And eventually one night I told her about those papers with the DNA percentage on it. And she was like, I sure reckon you ain't got no peck in your skin. That's why you sure was fine. Nah, she didn't talk like that for real. She was kind of snooty, actually. She had gone and gotten herself a PhD in English, taught at the college. In fact, she spoke better than I spoke. A couple of times I told her that sheet was wrong, and she just nodded at me like that. Yeah, me and Aisha, we didn't end up lasting that long. The second time around, I couldn't have her loving me for something that I'm not. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a treat. He reads it better than I do. It was a treat for all of us. Okay. Could you hear me when I wasn't there? Yeah, was Obi right? In the back with the red shirt. Can you hear me with the red? Okay. It's possible. I don't. Maybe I'll use this for a while. So let me read the introduction. In the old days, I could read without these. Now I have this, and I have big fonts. This all happened in the last year, just like so. Anyway, so that's a different. I'll write that story later. But so this is my introduction. So this, by the way, Flash Fiction America. I was one of 3 editors. James Thomas is he's edited 30 years of flash fiction anthologies from Norton. James started it with Sudden Fiction, and then went to Flash Fiction International, and so on. Flash Fiction Forward. And he asked me to join him on this book, which will be the last, he says, Flash Fiction book, Flash Fiction Anthology. And Sherry Flick is the chief editor at Smoke Lung Quarterly. which is a preeminent publisher of flash fiction. She teaches at Chatham and Carlow Universities in Pittsburgh, which is where she lives. So we all worked on this together, and our sort of self-appointed task was to make sure that this represented the diversity in American letters, and so that was what we were aiming at. So here's my introduction. Tell me a story, our reader says. Make me laugh, make me cry, carry me away. Help me to imagine a more compelling world. Help me to understand who I am and who these other people are and what we're all doing here and why we're doing it. And if you can do that with language that is fresh and provocative, with nouns that are precise and verbs that are muscular, and if your usage is prescriptively flawless or wonderfully flawed, and if you can make me sing to the music of your prose, if you can bring the news of your world to my world, if you can tell it slant and keep it short, so much the better. Telling stories and reading them are how we make sense of the world, how we amend our bewilderment. This narrative impulse is as necessary for our survival as breathing. Flash fiction isn't new. We have had fables, of course, and folk and fairy tales, biblical parables, exempla, Zen koans. We might also include anecdotes, jokes, and every bit of gossip we've ever shared over drinks at the kitchen table, every mumbled disclosure in the confessional, or secret whispered in bed, and every introductory exchange with strangers we met at cocktail parties. It's all very short, all driven by narrative, and flash might be the most prevalent form of storytelling there is. Anton Chekhov, who arguably invented the modern short story, wrote many very short stories of 600 or 700 words. Kafka gave us parables and paradoxes, and Borges, his ficciones. At the turn of the last century, McClure's magazine published daily shorts. In 1926, Collier's Weekly began printing one-page narratives. Cosmopolitan followed. For more than 50 years, beginning in 1920, Nobel laureate Yasunari Kawabata wrote his spare and lyrical palm of the hand stories. Hemingway wrote very short stories in his debut collection, In Our Time. Mildred Reed and Delmore Bordeaux published a craft book, Writers, Try Short Shorts. But then the form seemed to fall out of favor for a moment, only to be revived about the time that Robley Wilson took over the editorship of the venerable North American Review and treated us to 4-minute fictions. And when Irving Howe edited Short Shorts, an anthology of the shortest stories. Richard Brautigan gave the genre a boost with his compact and comic countercultural tales, as did Grace Paley and Luisa Valenzuela with the quick, emotionally charged stories, and Sandra Cisneros with her luminous vignettes in House on Mango Street, and Raymond Carver, and Joyce Carol Oates, and John Edgar Wideman, and Donald Barthelme with his enigmatic postmodernist shorts. And then came the anthologies, sudden fiction, flash fiction. The very short story was no longer an experiment, but a recognized genre. The New Yorker publishes flash these days, and Duotrope lists 483 markets welcoming flash fiction. Flash isn't new, and it isn't going away. Flash fiction is narrative, or it's not, that is distilled, cogent, concentrated, layered, elusive, textured, insightful, and unpredictable. It's short, but not shallow. It is a reduced form used to represent a larger, more complex story. And like the gist of a recollected conversation, it offers the essential truth, if not all the inessential facts. Like poetry, flash benefits from arbitrary constraint. In this case, 1,000 words. Why 1,000? Because you have to draw the line somewhere. Art lives in constraints and dies from freedom, Leonardo da Vinci said. Flash makes meaning through compression, and this word limit may be all we need to begin thinking in an unhabitual way. Less is more. Brevity is both the soul of lit and an invitation to undermine the narrative conventions of the traditional short story. But you need to write a lot to write a little. To be brief takes time. Writing flash fiction is the art of omission. What you leave out is as important as what you leave in. It's not the notes you play, Miles Davis said. It's the notes you don't play. Flash esteems glance above gaze. This is fiction approaching haiku, the art of few words and many suggestions. And like haiku, flash fiction does not do our thinking for us, but starts us thinking. Does not explain, only indicates. Flash carries the collaboration between writer and reader to another level. The story is the call that awaits its response. The writer, we might say, evokes the images that the reader dreams with. In conventional stories, we expect that the central character will be changed as the result of their struggle. But plots in Flash may be elliptical, off the page, implied rather than expressed. And so it might be the reader, not the character, who is changed. The reader may be left feeling radiant joy, profound sadness, bewildering shock. Flash fiction seems to operate like dreams, which have middles, but not many beginnings or endings. You're already falling through the air, terrified and confused. How can this be happening? And you never reach the source of the gravity before you wake. A work of Flash begins in the midst of things, advances quickly, and ends abruptly. The narrative is over, but the story goes on in the mind of the reader, who has been surprised, and the act of imagining goes on in the direction suggested by the story. Flash fiction is not about a lifetime or a season. It's about a heartbeat, the vital center, the driving impulse of life. 30 years ago, in his introduction to the first Flash fiction anthology, James Thomas expressed his pleasure at presenting stories of minimal and rapid trajectory, asking the question, how can a short story be truly a story? Here we are again trying to answer by way of example in Flash fiction. America, exploring the varieties of cultural experience, telling our reader many very short stories, complete and resonant, which are all about all the ways all of us live in America today. Okay, and then I'm going to read some of the stories that are in there. By the way, I just thought of this. James, when he was his first anthology, he didn't know what to call it. He didn't know what to call these little stories. He was going to call them blasters or something like blasters. And he was sitting at his desk writing. He says, this is true, a flash of lightning hit outside this door. And he said, okay, it's flash fiction. Okay, I get the message. That's what I'll call it. Okay. So, any questions about anything I said or what this means? Or I hope it's it was supposed to be explanatory or self-explanatory. So this first story I want to read is called The Solutions to Brian's Problems by Bonnie Jo Campbell. I guess I don't need these for that. Okay. The solutions to Brian's problems. Solution number 1. While Connie is at the store buying formula and diapers, load up the truck with the surround sound home entertainment system and your excellent collection of power tools, put the baby in the car seat, and drive away from this home you built with your own hands. Not to your mother's, because that's where Connie will come looking. Expect that after you leave, she will break all the windows in this living room, including the sliding glass door which you've already replaced twice. The furnace will run and run. Then she will go to your mother's house, curse at your mother, and possibly attempt to burn that house down. Connie has long admired the old 3-generation farmhouse for its big windows and cupola, and the thought that she will never live there will infuriate her. Solution number 2. Wait until Connie comes back home from the store with her baby. Then cut her meth with Drano so that when she shoots up, she dies. Solution number 3. Put the baby to bed in her crib, then sit right here on the living room couch until Connie comes home. Before she even has a chance to lie about where she's been, grab her hair and knock her head hard into the fireplace that you built from granite blocks that came from the old chimney of the house your great-grandfather built when your family first came to this country. Blocks you gathered from the old foundation that sits in your mother's woods. Don't look at the wedding photos on the mantle. Don't look at Connie's wide smile or the way her head tilts back in an ecstasy that seems to have nothing to do with drugs. Don't let the blood stop you from hitting her one final time to assure you have cracked her skull. Put her meth and her bag of syringes and blood-smeared needles in her hand so the cops find them when they come. You will tell them it was an accident, that you were arguing, and the argument escalated because she threatened to shoot meth into the baby. Solution 4, just go. Head south where it's warm. After a few hours, pull over at the truck stop and call your mother to warn her to watch the perimeter, to call the cops if she sees Connie. After that, pretend not to have a wife and a baby. When put to the test, Connie might well rise to the occasion of motherhood. Contact the union about getting a job with another local. Resist taking any photographs with you, especially the photographs of your baby at every age. Wipe your mind clear of memories, especially the memory of your wife first telling you she was pregnant, and how that pregnancy and her promise to stay clean made everything seem possible. Do not remember how the two of you kept holding hands that night, couldn't stop reaching for each other, even in your sleep. She lost that baby and the next one, and though you suspected the reason, you kept on trying. Solution number 5. Blow your head off with a 12 gauge you keep behind the seat of your truck. Load the shotgun with shells, put the butt against the floor, rest your chin on the barrel, pull the trigger. Let your wife find your bloody headless corpse in the living room. Let her scrape the brain from these walls. Maybe that will shock her into straightening up her act. Let her figure out how to pay the mortgage and the power bill. Solution number 6. Call a helpline. Talk to a counselor. Explain that last week your wife stabbed you in the chest while you were sleeping, that she punches you too, giving you black eyes that you have to explain to the guys at work. Explain that you're in danger of losing your job, your house, your baby. Tell them she has sold you your mountain bike and some of your excellent power tools already, that you have been locking the remainder in your truck, which you park a few blocks away from the house. Try to be patient when the counselor seems awkward in her responses, when she inadvertently expresses surprise that you are being abused by a woman, when you admit that Connie's only 5'4". Expect the counselor to be even less supportive when you say, hell yes, you hit her back. Tell the counselor that it's the little things too, that at least once a week Connie rearranges things in the house, not just the furniture, but all your financial files and the food, all of which last week she moved to the basement, including the milk and meat, which you then had to throw away. Then realize that the counselor probably has caller ID. Hope that the counselor doesn't call social services because a baby needs her mama. Assure the counselor that Connie is a good mama, that she's good with the baby, that the baby is in no danger. Solution number 7, make dinner for yourself and your wife with the hamburger in the fridge. Sloppy Joes maybe, or a goulash with the stewed tomatoes your mother canned. Your mother, who like the rest of your family, just thinks your wife is moody. You haven't told them because it's just too much to explain. And it's too much to explain that, yes, you knew she had a history of this when you married her, when she got pregnant, but that you thought you could kick it together. You thought that love could mend all the broken things. Wasn't that the whole business of love? Mix up some bottles of formula for later tonight when you will be sitting in the living room, feeding the baby, watching the door of the bathroom, behind which your wife will be searching for a place in her vein that has not hardened or collapsed. When she finally comes out, brush her hair back from her face and try to get her to eat something. The end. Well, that was uplifting, wasn't it? I thank you for Bonnie Joe. When I teach flash fiction, and this is a story that, well, I'd like it's in here, but it's a good story too. Thank you so much, Maurice. Say goodbye to Maurice Carlos Ruffin. Don't forget your phone. It's a good to talk about. This is a nice formula. You can study this formula. I got 7 solutions or whatever you do. Ask yourself, you could ask yourself, am I anybody's Connie? People have to watch me like this. Am I causing trouble in somebody's life? Or do you have a Connie in your life? Do you live with a Connie? I know many of us have over the years to do, and you go, when will Connie leave? And Connie never leaves. So you could use that strategy for telling a story, the structure, a model, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to it, for writing a short story. Any comments on that story? It's like, I always forget how gruesome it is. I got back to it. I think it's one. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to do that. Of course, he doesn't do anything. He ends up trying to get his wife to eat. Trying to do this is the right thing. At least for today. Okay, this Bonnie Train, 163. Okay, this story is. That's about it. 163. By Mina Chang. It's called An Alternative Theory Regarding Natural Disasters, as posited by the teenage girls of Clove County, Kansas. It was the summer the tornado ripped through town, peeling the roof off the Crossroads Diner and powdering the big front windows, hurling the deep fat fryer through the windshield of a Ford Ranger in the parking lot, and spinning the silverware bin so fast it embedded 7 coffee spoons into the wooden door of the Lucky Dog Tavern across the road. It was the summer of jagged hailstones and flattened wheat crops, of immature seed heads pulped into flesh mud that baked dry again before lunchtime the next day. There were no jobs for farmhands that year, but plenty of work at the Windfall Roofing Company, so the high school boys labored in town, hammering shingles and sweeping boiled tar across the flat roofs of the laundromat and the 2 dudes' enchilada hut. They cursed and shimmered shirtless in the heat for us girls to assess as we sat in Delpha Cargill's car on a vacant lot that used to be Crossroads Diner, sipping cool vodka lemonade and passing judgment. It was the summer of Crystal Toynbee, that Crystal Toynbee tied her drunk husband up in a bed sheet and beat him with a cast iron skillet until he pleaded for mercy. But she knew how his bare-knuckle mercy worked, so she kept swinging until her muscles burned with fatigue and hope, leaving everyone in town marveling at how a tornado could render a man unable to speak or eat or piss without a straw. It was the summer Worthington Cargill left his wife and daughter, taking the insurance money from his hail-damaged farmhouse and his dented Ford Ranger, and drove all the way to Telluride to let his to bet his life's cash on a pair of jacks with a group of players who knew how to handle a yahoo who insisted they call him worthy. It was the summer Jim McCross fell bare-assed on the floor of the men's room at the Lucky Dog after a surprise weasel launched out of the toilet. The animal misplaced and traumatized by the storm, the man misplaced and traumatized by the loss of the diner his father had built, leaving Jim staggering more from the sudden absence of patrimonial obligation than from intoxication or rodent-fueled adrenaline. It was the first summer in 10 years we saw Delpha Cargill's mother smile. Mrs. Cargill used her husband's life insurance payout to go into business for herself, finding that a decade of marital disappointment had honed her knack for sizing up unemployed farmhands and stray local boys. She put them to work slopping hot tar while teaching Delpha how to keep the books and an insurance policy and size, and how to keep books and structure an insurance policy and size up a man. It was the summer we watched Crystal Toynbee and Jim McCross fall in love over a platter of cheesy poblanos at the Two Dudes Enchilada Hut. Filled with spice and newfound freedom, they ran off to Telluride to open a t-shirt shop with a 2 for the price of 1 sales policy and a wildcat poker game in the back that more than offered their loss on bargain-priced Van Halen tees. The loft above the shop came with a half-size refrigerator and a king-size bed where they slept until noon whenever they wanted, and no one would give them any shit about it. It was the last summer of acquiescence, when convention spun free in a ferocious whirl of wind and consequence. And though our fathers argued we didn't yet understand, we decided that sometimes a tornado is just what a town needs. The end of that one. Okay. Thank you for mine. And who is next here? At least 153. Okay. Well, here's one here. I just opened to this. By Stephanie Friel. It's called James Brown is Alive and Doing Laundry in South Lake Tahoe. Stu is driving to South Lake Tahoe to take his postpartum strained woman to the snow, to take his 9-week-old infant through a storm, to take his neglected dog on a 5-hour car ride, and to take himself into his woman's good graces. And he's hungry. Stu has considered more than once stopping the car on the whitened highway and plunging himself over a cliff so he could plop into a cozy pile of snow and hide until his wife is logical again, or the baby is able to tend to itself. He's not dressed warmly enough for months or years in a snowbank. He has no snacks in his jacket, and he must focus on the family of 4, the woman, Stu, their baby, the dog. It's almost blizzarding. The windshield wiper fluid is frozen. The window is frosted. The dog is antsy. The baby whimpering. The woman, who should be happy, she nagged for days to go to the snow, is intermittently admiring the snow and whining about cramped legs. Stu is trapped by the car. The family has his family. He's trapped by the car, his family, his own legs, on the snow, which is falling, falling, falling. Megan's legs are killing her, mostly because her shoes don't fit. Her man thinks that her feet will go back to a previous size after after she lost the last 11 pounds. No shoes fit, and she just knows her $300 ski boots will be terrible. She removes her shoes. She should have done this miles ago and feels instant relief. She's also relieved that the baby is calm. The baby coos and says eh and ooh and wiggles his little fist. The dog lies with her head on the baby's car seat. Megan remarks that this is adorable. The man grunts. Philip, who is 9 weeks old and does not have control of his muscles just yet, sees the dog's head and would like to touch her, especially the black circle around the dog's eye. However, Philip's little fists go every which way, but not that way. He grunts little noises when his fists don't do what he wants them to do. Bebop, the dog, wishes she had a yellow squeaker toy, like the one at home, the yellow one sitting on her round bed. If she had the yellow squeaker toy, she would squeak it and thrust it into the fist of the baby. Perhaps the baby would throw it for her, because her man and woman never throw anything anymore. Stu is afraid to talk because his woman might cry again. She cries a lot lately, even though he is working harder than he ever has before, is bringing in a good paycheck and is taking the family on their first vacation. Instead, he is silent. The snow is falling, and he thinks he might just have to pull over, run out into the snow and scream into the darkening forest. But then he might get lost and have to eat his horse like the Donner Party. But he doesn't have a horse. The Donner Party are themselves and their horses in North Lake Tahoe, not south. They didn't have cell phones. Megan is trying not to cry. She's sick of being fat, sick of being a milk machine, sick of having her own income, sick of being dependent on her man, and sick of not knowing what to do when the baby cries. It is her first baby, and sometimes she doesn't think she has any idea of what she's doing. She feels like an imposter and is terrified someone will catch on very soon and point at her, yell at her, and take her child away from her because she is a crybaby. She doesn't know this. She knows that this is stupid and feels even more like crying when she realizes the stupidity of her stupidity. Philip watches the dog blink, and this is interesting, but a flailing fist pops up and punches Philip in the eye, and he lets out a cry. Bebop curls into a ball away from the crying baby who has just punched himself in the eye. The cries are a lot like the sound of her squeaker toy, and Bebop lets out a world-weary sigh. Stu hears the dog sigh, the baby cry, and notices the woman's discomfort. He is helpless and wants to say something, but knows if he says anything at all, even something he thinks is nice or helpful or pleasant or cheerful, his woman might weep, and then he'd have 2 cries and 1 sire. Megan squirms through the snow and reads the signs on the hotels and restaurants. The car stops at a red. In front of a laundromat, on the sidewalk, stands a dark man with black hair and a leather jacket. He wiggles thick eyebrows up and down and squints in the snow as he smokes a cigarette. Megan speaks, "Hey, look, James Brown." Philip hears his mother's voice, her happy voice, and pauses. Bebop lets her tail wag once and sits up. Mom's happy. Mom's happy. Stu catches sight of the man. His woman is correct. There stands a guy who looks just like a happy James Brown. He's alive and doing laundry, Stu says. The man's eyebrows wiggle. He looks over toward the family and opens up his jacket, revealing a shirt that reads glittery, "Giving up food for funk." Stu's woman grins. It is James Brown, downtown. The dog studies James Brown while whipping her tail on the baby's car seat. The baby says, "Ooh, ooh." Right on, right on. Stu presses the button, lowering the window, Cold pine air drifts in. His woman lets her arm out and brings back snowflakes on her sweater to show everyone the end. James Brown. Wow. Thank you. Where are we? Oh, we only have 4 minutes. I got like 6 more stories to read. We don't want to do that. But before we have to wind up, does anybody have any questions about any of those stories? What you learned from there? One lesson is every story is about trouble. There's trouble everywhere. And if you're a writer, that's what you go looking for, trouble. You don't want it in your life. It gets in the way of the writing. But everything that you don't want to happen to yourself or to your family or to your friends should happen to your character. Any questions? Well, thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Yeah.